It was kind of just like the wild, wild west out there. There wasn't a lot of rules or procedures or processes in place. We've learned a good branch manager can really make or break your branch, especially when it's a brand new branch in a new area.
All right. What are the biggest operation mistakes most pest companies make when they try to grow? Today, Dan Farah, who is the Chief Administration Officer at RIDD, which is a very appropriate name for a pest company, by the way, is joining to talk to us just about that. Dan, thanks for coming on and talking shop with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
No, these conversations really are just a lot of fun. And I think the best way to get started is, can you just give us a little background about you and your brother? I know it's kind of a family business that you guys got going and started there. Would love to just hear the story and then dive into how you grew, and then we'll get into kind of the more gritty details about how you guys grew the way you did.
Yeah, so I joined RIDD about a year after they started. So we have 3 co-founders, 3 owners, essentially. 2 of them were sales managers at a different pest control company. Yeah, long story short, they just decided to break off and do their own thing. And then they looped in the 3rd owner, who has started a couple small businesses before, and he has, master's in accounting. So he kind of became our de facto CFO. So those 3 started the company, and they were able to get off the ground pretty quickly because the 2 who were previous sales managers were able to bring over all their reps from their previous company. My brother, who runs all kind of the field work operations, he was working with them before at that previous company, and he opened up our Orlando branch that we used to have. He was doing so good. They're like, hey, we need you in the office to help us with more operations. He's like, cool, done, I'm there. And so then after he joined, a few months later, they needed someone to run kind of the office operations. And that's where he's like, hey, I have a brother who, he's worked at a corporate job. He's worked in a call center. He works in software. He has, the education. At first, honestly, when they talked to me, I thought it was going to be a hard pass. I don't know sales. Like, I went to school in corporate route. I didn't do the sales thing. I have nothing against it. I just didn't think I was a good fit for it. But long story short, they made it enticing enough. So I joined on about 3 years, I think a week. I hit my 3-year mark. So 3 years ago is when I joined on to run all the office operations. And yeah, I've just been plugging along ever since.
Wow, that's cool.
I got a question for you, Dan. So at what point in the RIDD journey did you join then? So was that like a year after they started, or how big was RIDD when you came on board?
I guess I joined in the middle of our second summer, which was a terrible time to join because it was madness. But really, I think we only had about 7,000 or 8,000 customers when I joined. So still like a pretty good base for just your first year. We've definitely grown a lot from, 7,000, 8,000 customers to the 30-ish thousand and counting we have right now.
That's some pretty serious growth, though. I mean, in such a short time frame.
Yeah. And again, I gave a lot of the credit to our owners, our co-founders, just because, again, we're very reliant on the doors, and hopefully one day, down the road, we're not as reliant on the doors, and we can kind of figure out how to get more organic growth or more kind of stuff done online, which we do that now. And that's just kind of what we've been hammering out the last couple of summers, is just send the door-to-door sales reps out and support them however we can.
What would you say is the number one thing to succeed at going to the doors?
A couple of years ago, before we started doing kind of auditing accounts and getting things like welcome calls, such as Apruv and things like that put in place, it was kind of just like the wild, wild west out there. There wasn't a lot of rules or procedures or processes in place where they kind of could do whatever they wanted. Not that it was, always a malicious act. It was just they didn't have enough structure. So I think to support the sales reps, you got to give them some structure of kind of like the do's and don'ts, and like, here are the best types of customers to sell. Like they got to have this type of income, this type of home, this type of area, this type of market where maybe there's more of a need for pest control. So like, for example, we're based out of Utah here, and we have a small branch, but it's really cold a lot of the year. So we ended up kind of in the South and in Florida and North Carolina, South Carolina, where there's definitely more of a need. You can sell a customer for a month or 2, but we want to try and sell them for a couple of years, right? We want to make sure that down the line, they're still our customers and not, 6 months from now, they're already wanting to leave RIDD. So,
and that kind of sounds like what your role was when you came into the company, was kind of getting through the Wild West, getting through the chaos, and starting to set in some real operational things for RIDD. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some days it still does feel like the wild, wild west in the summer, but we've definitely come a long way, right? We've made some good strides. For example, the office, we have customer service, we have retention, we have scheduling, we have collections, we have, inside sales.
Well, that was kind of my question is, so what did your day one look like? Like, did you come in and you're just like, whoa, like what were the key kind of breaking points that you recognized right off the bat? They're like, hey, if we fix these, if we streamline these, this is going to make a big difference overall in how we perform.
We realized we were understaffed in some areas and we were overstaffed in others. And staffing is always probably going to be the kind of hardest thing for us to figure out. And I think a lot of other companies struggle with this too, because obviously in the summer, you get tons of growth, right? You need tons of technicians, you need tons of customer service reps, you need tons of retention reps. But then, come October to March, you don't kind of need as many people as you had before. So kind of figuring that balance of when to hire, when to maybe shift someone's role to do something else. Yeah. For example, in customer service, we had like one person doing a bunch of manual work that I was able to automate within our CRM. We had that same person responding to all the text messages from the sales reps. So we essentially hired a few more people and kind of sectioned out or siloed some other responsibilities while leveraging some automation within field routes and other things that we have.
That's probably a common place because, you see it all the time. That's one of the big things that's always being pushed to pest control companies is hiring the right people. We'll do the hiring for you. Is there a good vetting process that you use? And what's the difference between vetting somebody who's going to go knock doors or who's going to go service homes versus someone who's going to work internally?
Maybe I'm just selfish, but I like to do it myself. I'm in, at least for the office, I'm in every single interview for the office, right? As far as the sales rep technicians go, that's more for like kind of our sales managers. And yeah, the vetting process can definitely be hard, right? Because it's, you spend so much time finding the right person that you think is going to fit. But you don't totally know until they actually start working on the job. But yeah, just putting checks and balances in place. When we post our job postings, we're trying to be very specific in what we need and what we want and the qualifications we need. We screen all the resumes, then we do a phone interview, sometimes a second phone interview, and then we always bring them in person. We like in-office work. That's kind of how we roll right now. We have plenty of space here at the office, so we want them in office. And usually by that point, we should have a good idea of who we think they are. And as long as, they seem like they could fit in the interview, we hire them. And then after that, they get a couple weeks of training and, we have certain kind of checks and balances in place to measure their performance each month to make sure they're hitting the benchmarks they need to. But I will say the one thing I think I learned is, I learned this from another person. This isn't my quote, but it's somebody else's, where they say they've never regretted, letting someone go, but they have regretted keeping them for too long. So that's probably the hardest balance we find is, it's tough, right? You invest so much time into this person that you bring in. And if it just doesn't work out, there's still a human aspect to it where, you feel bad. You don't want to have them lose their job. But at the end of the day, you've got to find a good fit for you and for whoever's working for you. Again, kind of building out those processes and those benchmarks where it's like, all right, in 3 months, they got to be doing these things or else we've got to find somebody else. I think what we have has worked enough to this point. We'll continue to kind of try and refine it as much as we can.
Is there anything that you're particularly proud of that you went in and installed in as operationally that you're like, man, this worked. I had the vision for it. I installed it. And it came together. Anything that like that comes to mind?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely have plenty of failures I can always share too, probably more than I'd like to admit.
We'll focus on the positive.
So yeah, before I came here, I was working in software for the last 4 years. I was testing software and actually learning to be a software developer. Pulling on that experience, when I got to our CRM field routes, we weren't leveraging any automation whatsoever. And I'm like, okay, knowing what I know from my previous job, if field routes is any good at all, they will have some basic things like sending reminders that are automated, charging customers that are automated, sending out maybe some like collection notices that are audited. So the one thing I was really proud of is, I spent a couple of weeks kind of learning about their automation and learning about what they had to offer. And I installed, they call them trigger rules, but I installed, probably 24 different trigger rules. I just took away so much manual work, right? It just goes on its own and we could dedicate our efforts to other things. It was honestly a really kind of basic thing. It's not like I created it or anything. I just read up on it for a few weeks and few days and tested it out a couple of times. And thankfully I did it back then because, if we were doing the same manual work we were 3 years ago today with 3 times the customers, we wouldn't last doing it manually. So,
well, thank goodness you came in when you did then, because you're exactly right. Like that kind of growth still being done manually would have been a headache to do for that. Like, I can't even imagine trying to field, thousands of different requests and responding. Your phone never goes off. You have, hear the chimes when you're trying to sleep. I don't think that people, when they think about pest control, they think it's as simple as, oh yeah, we'll just come, we'll spray, we'll do it. But there's a lot of moving pieces that go into every single home and even behind the scenes, the operations that you've described. I just don't think that very many people are aware of how much that goes into that.
I thought it would be a lot simpler than it is. And I feel like sometimes we overcomplicate things, but then like you said, to get a new customer signed up to legal documentation signed to getting on a route to the door, then everything goes into the products. But it's been a lot more than I ever thought it would be.
Dan, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but from a hiring standpoint with growth, how do you guys manage that? If you're growing at a certain level, you got to have a certain amount of technicians to actually fulfill and do the work, right? How do you guys manage that, and how do you guys forecast that?
We use a lot of the data from the year before. So we say, okay, we had X amount of sales reps who did X amount of sales. So that requires, 5 new technicians in this market if we do the exact same as we did last year. Now, where it gets a little sticky is like, yes, if you have exactly 5 new technicians, that's great. But usually when you hire 5 people, you're not going to go 5 for 5. You're not going to bat 1,000, right? When you hire those new people, not just for technicians, but in any kind of job. So we maybe think, okay, cool, let's hire 7 and see how those work out over time. And then on top of that, you still got to have kind of backups. So we even have they're kind of like an on-call tech where yes, they work every day, but we don't build them a route until morning of, just in case somebody does call out sick or something, they go cover that route. And if no one calls out sick or if everyone's at work, we'll build them a route on the fly. So it's hard to forecast the amount of sales you'll do. It's hard to forecast the amount of sales reps you'll have just because it's so competitive. They might sign up one week, but then go to another company another week because that works better for them and that's great for them. And then if we project, 20% more sales from whether it's from the office or on the doors, we got to add, 20% to the current numbers we have. And with me working in software, we were data nerds over there. So we try and leverage, all the data we can to make the best guess that we can when it comes to forecasting.
See, that's the money formula right there. Can you walk us through, like, how did you dive into the numbers? What were you looking at that, landed on okay, this is what we should expect in terms of needed technicians? I think that'd be super helpful to know.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely the biggest pain point, right? In my opinion, nothing kind of breaks pest control more than not having enough technicians or having, lots of call outs to where a job of 15 homes just doesn't get serviced for whatever reason. For example, a technician was able to handle 10 stops a day. All right, if we sell 100 customers in one market, then you've got to have, that many extra technicians to cover 100 extra sales a day while taking care of your current customers. Because you can't forget those people either, right? Because you work so hard to have those customers. They've been with you for a year. You don't, at that point, they're very profitable. They like you. You don't want to lose them. So really, you got to kind of forecast, how many recurring customers do you still have? And are they quarterly service? Are they bi-monthly service? How often do they need service on top of, okay, we had 50 sales reps last year. We're going to have 70 sales reps this year. And then the other thing I think we started to learn too is we look at the sales reps that are returning because usually they sell more than they did the year before. At least that's the goal, right? You want them to do better than they did the year before. So say, all right, let's just say, Joe over here was selling 2 or 3 a day last year. Cool. Let's try and plan on him doing 3 or 4 a day this year because we think he can do it, so just kind of maybe upping their percentages 20% maybe. And some do the same and that's great. But there's definitely some that improve and that's what we want for them. But yeah, I guess kind of the formula that we kind of cobbled together is, sales per day, jobs done per day. If we only need 4 or 5 technicians, probably 1 or 2 extras all you need. But if you need an extra, 10 technicians for the summer, you probably want 2 extra at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense too. So I would also love to reverse engineer, what about going and opening a new area? We're really eyeballing, this location, this city in Florida. What do the decisions go into in terms of how do you assign the number of guys that go and knock doors and techs and things like that? I would love to hear just sort of your strategy to saying, we're going to go get some more territory.
Hopefully we're done an opening area because it is a very tall task, very necessary, but a very, very tall task. I think one of the other big things we learned is, the more dense your markets are, the better off you'll be, right? You can do more stops per day. It's more centralized. You have one branch manager that can manage it. Of course, we involve kind of the sales manager or the branch partner or who's going to run that area. We do our market research. We did that before. We look at, something basic as how many people live there, what's the average income, what's the average home size, what's the weather like, what are kind of the specific pests that are there. Because there's some, for example, we're not in Arizona, but I hear Arizona has lots of scorpions and tarantulas. And, we would have no idea how to take care of those because we don't even have products. We've never dealt with those before, right? So trying to familiarize ourselves with what we already know, making sure there's kind of no curveballs that we'll encounter on the daily, which we still hit different bugs each day. But yeah, really, it's just a lot of market research. And then once that's done, maybe see what other companies are, what's the competition like, maybe search kind of some of the bigger companies and see what markets they're in. Cause, obviously the bigger companies are big for a reason. They get it right. The next biggest thing that we've learned is you got to you got to get a good branch manager. The branch manager is boots on the ground. He's managing technicians. He's making sure they're applying the right product to each property and taking care of all the pests there. We've learned a good branch manager can really make or break your branch, especially when it's a brand new branch in a new area.
Yeah, that does sound like a tall order. And it's just fun to kind of hear kind of the behind the scenes process, because I had a sales guy at my door yesterday. I got home from work and he was there. And of course we talked him up and stuff, and, we're listening to his thing. And so there's so much. And I think people do have a pretty bird's eye view of these guys that go and knock doors, but really don't understand the internal logistics of what it takes to get somebody to your door, to knock your door and start talking pest with you.
Paint the vision, Dan. Do you guys have a goal for RIDD? I know there's lots of different strategies in pest control. Are you guys wanting to do like long-term hold, exit? What have you guys kind of thought through where you want to take RIDD?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer probably changes like every single day. But yeah, the long-term goal honestly changes kind of the more we learn and the more we observe how their pest controls are running. But I'd kind of say like the intermediate goals, the short-term goals right now are just grow as fast as we can with as much density as we can. Yeah, I mean, every summer we do is really big. We generate 15,000 new customers this summer probably, and we were at the same last summer. So we'll probably do 2 more heavy summers like that. And then we'll kind of want to pull back and maybe shift our focus from not so much on the doors, but to get more customers acquired through growing more organically and finding customers online more, because those customers tend to be better customers when they're calling you asking for a service versus us knocking on their door saying, hey, you should probably do this service.
This is something else I was curious about too. Like, do your branch managers, I would love to know a little bit more about the training that goes into when you talk to your guys about going and doing doors. Is it just role plays, or what does that usually look like to train guys to go and start knock doors? And I imagine are a lot of your guys it sounds like you got some veterans on the team, and then, some probably some guys who've never knocked before in their lives. But what does the training look like when you put a team together to go out and start knocking?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We got plenty of veterans, got plenty of guys who, especially our managers out there, they've been doing this for 5, 6, 7, 8 years even. But then there's plenty of rookies, right? Straight out of high school that are 18 years old. So it's really interesting because you got, anywhere from 17, 18 up to, 30 years old, maybe in the off season. So from about October to February, we do, our 2 owners who are who ran a sales team before, they do kind of like weekly trainings with various sales managers from things like, selling the service to your body language, to the way you speak to customer, to how to deal with they call them smoke screens, how to deal with objections. So in the summer, they do a meeting every single morning and they go over trainings, what went well from day before, what didn't go well, any new kind of updates from RIDD in general, things were changing, tons of role play, tons of sharing success stories, tons of sharing not success stories. And I think the one thing I appreciate the most about our veterans, because we have a couple of guys that have been doing this for a while who are very successful, is they're just so happy to talk to anybody, right? They'll talk to a rookie who's having a terrible day. They'll just call them up and give them kind of some pointers or some motivation. So I really appreciate our veterans always being willing to, even when it's 10 o'clock at night and they've been out selling all day, to sit down with, a rookie or someone who's struggling and role play with them right then and there. So I think it just goes back to kind of, the managers and leaders you have, and making sure they're the right ones, because they have a huge impact.
I want to ask everybody who comes on and talks to us about this, but the stories you must hear from these pest control guys, like from servicing or just talking to people, like you got one for us? Like, you had a favorite pest story that you like to share?
I'm trying to think which ones I can share. Let's think. No, I guess kind of a success one is happened 2 Saturdays ago, actually. So one of our best guys who usually sells 6 or 7 deals a day, like he's seriously one of the best ones we have. And Saturdays are usually the best day in general to sell because more people are home, right? You can get started earlier. They start at maybe 9 in the morning and go all day. And they find a lot more people in their homes. And it was like 3 or 4 o'clock and he had 0 sales, which has never happened to him before, ever. And he called me because he had a question about something. And I was like, oh, hey, how's your day going? He's like, honestly, terrible. I'm having the worst day of my selling career. And I didn't, it's not like I had any pointers for him because I could never sell anything, much less the caliber he sells. I was like, dude, I'm sorry. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And that's really all I told him after I helped him with kind of just one question he had not related to sales. But then he ended up with 6 sales. I don't know how he did it, but from about 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., he cranked out 6. I don't know how he did it. I don't know what he changed, but he just figured it out. So I think that's kind of cool where even like the best guys we have will have terrible days still.
Hey man, don't sell yourself short. We know you told him something you shared with him just made him turn it on. finally get cooking. I don't know what that was, but you definitely get
the Dan's secret sauce, man. He's got it somewhere up his sleeve.
Yeah, let me tell you, man, never sold a thing in my life, but I can tell our best guy how to sell.
Something else I would love to just dig into here at the end too is, things that are saving you time, because I love that was kind of your focus when you came in, is how do we automate? How can we be more efficient? What other tools, what other things are you using that you think are helping to automate and the process?
Apart from automation, probably just people, honestly. We just kind of have, at least in the summertime, we have coverage from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, right? So most of the guys are on Eastern Time, some from like 9 to 10 p.m. their time. What saved us a lot of time is just extending our hours in certain areas, like our internal like sales rep support line. They have coverage on that most of the day now, because before they wouldn't necessarily have all the support they needed. And so kind of things would stack up at night. And then the next morning, on top of kind of the crazy morning rush that is almost every day in the summer, you kind of have all these other pending items that need to get done. So instead of kind of letting all that stack up, we just try to address it daily. That usually saves a lot of time and a lot of headaches too, right? Because if something goes wrong, which there is always something that goes wrong despite our best efforts, we added a few new softwares. Obviously, Apruv was one of them.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about Apruv and integrating that into your systems. Was that a smooth transition? How did the team respond to having this software now that does what Apruv does?
Before last summer, I built an auditing program, where there's when they sell an account, here's kind of these 10 checks that they have to go through. One of those things being, we need them to know about certain parts of the contract, because obviously we have a contract that we send to a customer, but they're not going to read the whole thing on the doorstep there, right? So we need some type of call to say, okay, here's your service, here's your price, here's the cancellation fee, kind of the big pain points that we'd experienced before, because we'd have customers not knowing what's included in their service, not knowing price, not knowing kind of just the basic things they should know. And it protected us, but it also protected the customer, right? Because there'd be plenty of times where a customer calls us and says, I didn't agree to this. And be like, actually, here's kind of everything we did to show that you did agree to this. And vice versa, right? Maybe a sales rep didn't tell them something they should have, but now in this case, they don't really have a choice. Where we wanted to use Apruv mainly because, and this is kind of another time-saving thing that's helped us, is this welcome call software we're using before, they didn't really have complete control over it. It was just kind of like a text that was automatically sent to the customer. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but we couldn't ever resend that text. Or if a customer stopped the video halfway through because they had a question they want to ask their sales reps, we couldn't redo the video. So the reason why I found Apruv enticing is because it gives control to the sales rep, right? They can use their iPhone or iPad and just say, hey, here's a video, we got to do it. Here you go, and if it doesn't work, then we'll try it again, or they can still send it to the customer too, and the customer can do it on their own device. And I think they like that a lot better because, last year they didn't have control over it and they, fail an audit check and they kind of feel stuck in the middle, like, well, I tried to do the audit, but the customer didn't, complete the welcome call and I can't send it again type thing. So just because we've already integrated other things into our CRM, it was easy to send Apruv, like, hey, here's our key, here's our token, here's the script we want. And they loaded it up and I think it's been going pretty well. And I think the thing that's helped us a lot too is there's been a lot of work done to the dashboard. And I've bugged Jared a lot about this. And he's hopefully not too upset with me with all the questions I've had. He's been very patient with me. But I think just fleshing out that dashboard to where we can set certain filters to really get accurate numbers. Because the other problem we're having is, if a customer was created but the deal kind of fell apart towards the end, that would still count as like a missed welcome call. Whereas now with Apruv, we can say, all right, only count this customer if they've been scheduled and if they have more than a one-time service type thing. So I think being able to get even more accurate numbers from Apruv because of some of the things they've put in the last few months, that's also helped us a lot to get kind of really accurate, welcome call numbers for the guys.
Yeah, that sounds like a good fit in terms of just everything that you did when you came into RIDD in terms of just, efficiency, clean accounts, clear numbers, clear data. And that's what kind of set you up to grow the way that you did. Just awesome.
One closing question, Dan. So if you could give advice to another pest control company that is maybe either starting up or maybe more on the operations side, one key piece of advice, what would that be?
I have so much because I made so many mistakes that I wish I could do better. It sounds really cliche, but your people matter across the board, right? From the office to your technicians to your sales reps. I think as long as you set a clear goal for what your company to be, that your people need to support that goal and they matter. And, you know, I wish we had more benefits and more pay for everyone, but something as simple as, you know, we cater lunch once a week for the office, like they're getting pizza tomorrow. It's not a huge expense, but, you know, everyone looks forward to Wednesday. In fact, they think the most important thing about my job is making sure I get lunch here every single Wednesday. I guess the most stressful part of my job, because if I've never missed a Wednesday, but if I did, I know they'd riot. Running the company, we make plenty of mistakes, but we can't do it alone. So you got to have the right people and just make sure you treat them well. So people matter.